Welcome to Seize the Mains Daily Answer Writing Initiative. I'm Surbhi Sardana and I'm taking this lecture discussion on mains answer writing for civil services examination till May 3rd. If you are new to this initiative, you can download the schedule till May 3 from the link in the description below. The special part about this answer writing initiative is that you can write your answers and send them to us to be evaluated by our experts entirely free of cost. So starting with day 31 of Seize the Mains, and the topic for today is from GS paper 3. It is Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. So this is part of UPSC syllabus of GS paper 3. The questions asked from this area will be of two types. Either they will be based on crude economic concepts. For example, they will revolve around how to calculate GDP. For example, as we saw in the case of this year, that direct question was asked about the calculating method for GDP, or they'll revolve around Niti Aayog and Planning Commission as they have in the past, or direct crude topics from like economic subject from these areas, or the other topics would be based on your analysis part. Like how do you analyze the current situation of economy that is prevalent in India. So today also we are taking an analysis type of question which will include a little bit of data, and it will be from employment part of the syllabus. Similar questions have been asked in the past, but we've reframed this question to suit the needs of current students. So the question is, examine the crisis of unemployment and jobless growth in India. How can India avoid it in the post-pandemic recovery phase? Answer in 250 words for 15 marks. Write your answers and send them to us in the next 24 hours, that is by 24th March 9 p.m. So the special part about this question is that questions around unemployment and jobless growth have been asked by UPSC and state civil services in the past exams, but it is an ever increasing problem, the problem of unemployment. People sitting and preparing for competitive exams are going for higher education because one form of degree or one level of degree, for example a basic graduation, does not get them the kind of job they aspire to get. Or even after high school, in many countries people are directly employable after high school, but in India, because we don't have a lot of vocational education, that is not the case. People remain unemployed for a very long period of time, and that affects the society as a whole, not on the financial part but on the social part also. The age of marriages, people getting married late and having health issues around that, people getting mental issues because of like not having free cash available, because of not being able to support their families, or because of not being able to generate social mobility in their families. So those are the issues that erupt from unemployment and joblessness. So let's analyze what is happening here, how we'll proceed towards this answer. So since the directive here is examine, so whenever you talked about examine, you address all parts of the situation, you see in detail, you investigate whatever the situation is, and you use your knowledge, write the facts in your answers around that. So examine the crisis of unemployment and jobless growth in India. So when you examine the crisis of unemployment and jobless growth, first thing you will present with is data. What is the data of unemployment or joblessness that is prevalent in India, and what are the sources that are there for data? We'll be discussing some of the official sources in the next slide. Let's discuss the second part of the question also. How can India avoid it in the post-pandemic recovery phase? So this is a paraphrasing, asking you how to what is the way forward for avoiding this situation or for making this situation better. And the first part talks about talking about unemployment and joblessness in detail, about jobless growth in detail. Whatever you know around these two keywords, just write them down in your answer. So moving on to writing an introduction. An introduction is a conversation with the examiner. Here we'll talk about what has been happening in the economy for the past 2 years. So since the pandemic was there, so during the last 2 years, as India along with the rest of the world faced onslaught of the pandemic, government's key focus in India remained on providing a safety net to the vulnerable segments of society. as well as providing a coherent response to the health consequences of the pandemic. This is exactly from the economic survey, that line, that in the past 2 years we have not been able to focus on generating employment because the entire focus of government was to provide a safety net to all the vulnerable sections of society. So what happened? We were already facing a lot of unemployment and jobless growth before the pandemic, and now that issue has escalated. So here are your linkage points. Here linkage point is an extension of your introduction that gives a validation to your body paragraph, or that turns the direction of your answer towards the body paragraph, towards the context of the whatever has been asked in the question. So here we have two data types. One is taken from economic survey, the latest one available. This one is a bit old, of March 2021. The other data is from May August 2021, and it is from CMIE. So here you have a choice, use any kind of data, and this just represents the unemployment or employment situation of the country. Use one of these data and proceed on to write that unemployment and jobless growth are very big problems for the economy of the country, and they are prevalent in India due to the following reasons. What are the reasons of these two issues? After giving this data, we'll examine the reasons. So your first part of the answer will be complete. The examine part of unemployment and jobless growth will be complete. So this is your linkage point. Download the PDF of this presentation and read this after the lecture. Moving on to the body paragraph and analyzing what are the possible reasons that are there for unemployment and jobless growth in India. Here we'll be discussing 9 reasons for unemployment and jobless growth. Most of the reasons are old. They can be found in your NCERT books or the economic textbooks that you have been reading. But some of the reasons are new, which have erupted, especially after the pandemic. So whenever you're writing a multiple number of points, multiple number of reasons, you also have to adhere to the word limit and make your answer more presentable. How will you do that? By not using full sentences. If you're using headings like these, just underline the headings and don't write full sentences here if you are missing out on the word limit, because this is a very long answer and we have 9 reasons for this and around like similar number of way forward points that we'll have. So this will easily cross the 250 words word limit. So first thing that you will do is make it more clear for the examiner what you are writing, so that the examiner just goes through the diagram or flowchart that you have presented and he gets to know that okay, this person knows what he is writing and is very much clear. So either use a flowchart like this one, a tree diagram, or this, like there are 9 reasons, 4 of them will be enough. Or you make a flowchart like this and elaborate here by writing the heading, elaborate here, give definition of everything here. Don't worry about the content, we'll be reading this in full, plus the PDF of this presentation is available. So write all this in full here after giving the heading. So that makes your answer very different from other students and it makes it more presentable. So starting with the first reason is overpopulation. We have so many number of people and our economic growth is not commensurate with the number of people that we have. We are the 5th largest, 4th largest economy of the world, but our population is so high that our per capita income is very less as compared to developed economies or many developing economies also. Read about the case of Bangladesh, for example. So it's not like better, but it's almost nearer, and many indicators are also better for countries, for some neighboring countries. So rapid growth of population is one of the reasons. Second is immobility of labor. For example, if you're trained in the IT sector, if you're a software engineer or somebody trained for softwares or the IT sector, where are the jobs available? Only in few pockets of the country, only in few developed cities. Or if you have a particular type of skill in the construction sector or things like that, so only few pockets, especially like rural areas, there are very less number of jobs available. Mostly like there are small businesses or agriculture that is happening in rural areas, but the jobs that are available are in far-flung areas, and migration has to happen, and there has to be somebody sitting back home to be taking care of the family, of the old parents or other family members. So migration or Immobility of labor, because of the lack of jobs available in all areas of the country. That is another issue, that many people remain unemployed even after being skilled or being good enough for a job. The third is the defects in education system, as we talked about earlier. So we have high hopes from NEP 2020, National New Education Policy, because as of now we don't have much vocational education that is happening with studies. After high school we are producing a lot of unemployed people who have to take either like very low paying jobs, or like jobs where a lot of skills are not required, or they have to move towards higher education, move towards pursuing a graduation, which again requires mobilization of resources. A lot of funding is required for higher education. The next one is services sector growth. Here we'll talk about the services, industry and agriculture sector in the next points. So don't worry about the long like content that is available here. First things first, services sector contribute most to the GDP, but services sector does not employ a lot of people. So that is a very stark situation happening there, that more and more contribution is there but jobs are not there, especially after this automation, especially after coming of artificial intelligence, 3D printing, things like that. Mostly people, after even attaining a certain level of skill, remain unemployed, or they have to upskill themselves. So service sector growth is there, it is contributing towards the GDP but not towards the like employment. Low employment growth in manufacturing. India did not have an industrial revolution as the Western nations had it. So our industrial base is very low. Whatever industries are coming up, either they try to remain to the point of cottage industries or MSMEs. They don't want to convert into large industries due to the taxes, like because they'll have to pay higher taxes, or the benefits of government will not be available if they convert to large industries, or they are not able to compete with MNCs, large MNCs, or they are like overtaken beyond a certain point. They are overtaken by like foreign investors or MNCs when they come up with a new kind of idea. There's so many startups which have been overtaken by foreigners or foreign investors. So low employment growth in manufacturing, that is an issue, because having an industrial base is very important to employ a lot of people from all kind of skill levels, all levels of skill. So that is not there in India, which is a problem. The next one is reducing a share of agriculture sector. The share of agriculture sector towards like contribution to GDP is reducing, but a lot of people are still dependent on agricultural and related activities. So the remuneration that they used to get like around 1991 or like 2 decades earlier, that is not the same. The value of rupee has also weakened, and the profit margin has reduced in agriculture sector, while most of the people in rural areas and in semi-urban areas also, some of them are entirely dependent on agriculture, while it is not a very remunerative occupation. So that is there. The recovery, these are like recent points now, whatever have come out after the pandemic. The organized sector recovery is, unorganized sector recovery is very slow. Small businesses which are not even registered sometimes, or the employees of small businesses are not registered. The number of informal jobs in India is around 85%. 85% of people are employed in the informal sector. So that informal, that unorganized sector does not give any pension benefits, did not give any benefits to the people in times of pandemic. So what is the option available with people? The government did protect this vulnerable section of the population by supplying grains, by giving like direct cash benefits, but now the only option left with them is to be re-employed either with the same employer or to go to some other job. But how will this happen? Because profit margins are not good. Thanks to this Russia-Ukraine crisis, economic growth is not happening as it was expected. The prices of crude oil are very high, so economic growth is not taking place, and when that is not taking place, people will try to run their businesses in the informal sector with like lesser number of people. If an employer might think that okay, I'll employ two servants or 2 people for like 12 hours or so, rather than employing 5 people for 8 hours. So that is there. That is one of the reasons unorganized sector recovery is very slow. The other problem is K-shaped recovery. What is K-shaped recovery? If you have gone through your economic textbooks, some of the sectors are not recovering at the pace that they should have, and other sectors are coming up or are recovering at a higher pace than before. So that shift of people employed, and that is creating a chaotic situation. The last one is automation of jobs. This is a very good representation of a robot kicking a human being out of a job, out of a workplace. So this is a very good representation. Don't draw it in your paper. This is just for explanation. That a lot of automation is taking place. We are shifting to AI. More and more like jobs that were done by human labor are being now done by robots or are done by your gadgets. So due to this automation of job, a lot of jobs that were done by people are can be easily done by robots, and robots are very cost effective, or technology is very cost effective as compared to a human being. You do not have to give pension benefits or safety nets to machines. That can be easily done away with. So that is a very major issue, and this is not only for the informal sector but also for the formal sector. For skilled people, this is a major issue. In fact, lower level of skills can be now done by machines, and people have to upskill themselves even in their 30s, 40s or late 50s. So that is the situation the world is facing with today, and that question between caring for the human needs for an employment or caring for the development of technology, that remains a debate, and that has to be balanced at a certain point of time. So this was about, these were the reasons which were there for unemployment and jobless growth in India. The examine part of the question is done. The first part of this crisis, this has been dealt with in detail. So we gave you data and the reasons for it. Now let's come to the next part, addressing this crisis, which is such a cause of concern. How to address this? Again, go back to economics textbooks or any book that you're following for economy, your coaching notes or anything. The way forward, how to address jobless growth in India, that remains the same. There are some issues which have come up in the last 2 years. There are some way forwards, new kinds of ideas we've come up with. So they just have to be added, and make sure that these current points, you add them on the top, so that the examiner knows that you are well versed with the current happenings also. Again, for these points, for the way forward, draw a flowchart kind of a thing or a tree diagram, and then proceed with writing your answer within the stipulated word limit. Don't cross the word limit. We've been seeing this in many of the answers, that students just copy this answer as a whole as if it is a script, or do not adhere to the word limit. Even if you're copying this answer, we understand that prelims is approaching and you cannot add points from your side. Make sure that at least you adhere to the word limit by changing the structure of the answer, how you present it. So moving on, addressing India's jobless growth post pandemic phase. These are the points here. So first of all is the availability of right kind of data. As we saw in the starting of this question, there were two types of data. One was in favor of the government, the other one was against the government, against the unemployment situation of the country. So how do we get to know the reality? How do we get the reality check, that how many people are unemployed, what skill set do they have, what kind of what skill sets do they need, and what kind of jobs are they aspiring for? How do we get to know that? The first point is analyzing and improving labor market data. That has to be there, and by creating a labor market information system, this can be done. The government is already working on it, on different parameters of it, but this as a whole needs to be developed. The next point is about education and skill development. We've talked many times in this lecture itself that vocational education needs to be developed. The students must have the freedom to give up on education any time in their career journey. For example, if a person who is pursuing graduation, who has already invested 2 years of time or 2 years of money into the admission cost, into the examination fees that is there. So in the third year, if he goes through a major crisis in the family and he cannot support his education, so what happens right now? He just has two options. Either he gives up on his degree entirely, or he just negates the needs of his family and continues to support his education on his own. So we need to have an education system which supports giving up on that degree or education and being like being eligible for a lower level of degree, for a lower level of certification, for that recognition that has to happen, that a particular person has completed these many years of schooling, these many years of college and things like that, and that needs to be recognized by the industry. When it will be recognized by the industry? When we have vocational education, skill development happening side by side. And how this can happen? When education and industry work hand in hand. Like many of the degrees, many of the courses are even sponsored by the private sector in developed countries. So why can't we have that in India? We can obviously have that, and if that education is sponsored by the industry, so such people can be directly employed by those companies once they pass out, once they gain those certificates or that certification. So this has to happen. A lot of vocational training, skill development and partnership with the private sector has to go hand in hand, because employment is the basic human right. Employment is the right to work is enshrined in the constitution. It is the basic human right. We need employment for economic growth, to develop a cohesive social system. So education and skill development is there. NEP has a lot of we talked about this earlier also. There was a very good article in Indian Express about the role of these entrance tests that are happening, the central entrance tests that will be going on for the central universities all over India. So that addresses these areas. NEP has a lot of features which address this loophole in the education system. So let's see how that functions. The next part is improving women's participation in the economy. If you've been following this lecture series, we discussed earlier that the employment rate of women in urban areas has decreased as compared to what it was before a few decades, and it is less than 20%. Like less than 20% of women are employed in urban areas, and we're talking about cities here, not even about rural areas. So what does that represent? Like almost around 50% of our population is women, not exactly, but almost around 50%. And if those people do not have a professional identity, who are contributing to the economy but not in financial terms, so where do we expect our economy to head towards? So women employment is a key area of concern. It doubles the family income. It generates better education for the future generations also. So women employment has to be there to address this issue of unemployment, because many people who are in the unemployment percentage are women also. So that has to be addressed. Moving on, we discussed that the agriculture sector is facing a lot of issues. So addressing those issues, like moving people from agriculture based employment to either semi-agricultural things, for example animal husbandry, or entirely taking out the future generations from agriculture to education. They can have agricultural education also. There are so many agricultural universities running in India which are totally funded by the government. The courses are also funded by the government. So that can happen. We need to generate new areas of employment for people who are shifting from agriculture, and we need to understand that these people deserve respect. They should not be starting in the social ladder from the lowest rung. Like when they move to cities or when they decide to give up on agriculture, they should not be starting from the lowest level, because they have a lot of intelligence, a lot of informal education already which has passed through generations. So that needs to be harnessed, that has to be addressed by the government. Targeted programs for employment generation. For example, there are many schemes run by the government for employment generation of women, for employment generation of some religious communities which have a certain kind of skill, but that skill is either dying away or it does not get the enough kind of remuneration. Just check out the policies of government that are being run for minorities, for their education and skill development, and many loans and grants are also available for the minorities or for the deprived sections of population. So targeted programs for employment generation. So many times in rural areas we see that the government funds fashion designing courses or basic stitching courses, or just basic software understanding courses in the rural areas, and these people are given guaranteed employment by the government, and these courses are run by government in partnership with the private sector or with some state government. So we need more such targeted employment generation courses, and because this is the need of our. I skipped a point. There are many BPOs also, training for BPOs also happens in Like we saw one course in like Jammu and Kashmir that is happening, and in northeastern areas. Again, addressing the reason, like we had like lesser number of people employed in manufacturing and services, so we need to increase that. How will that happen? When we have more and more private investment, when we produce more domestic products. We are already doing that in the defense sector under the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme and the policy of government. A lot of domestic production will take place, but that needs to be revamped, that needs to be fastened up. So generating employment in service sector is the need of the hour, and it will work in consonance, in parallel with whatever the education or skills that we are providing to people. It just has to, like education and industry, they have to face each other, they have to see each other and understand each other's needs. They cannot work in darkness. They cannot, education cannot work in darkness, and the industry sector cannot develop itself if the education system is not aware of the needs of the industry. So that is there. So private sector investment is required, foreign investment is required. That is what is addressed in the second point here. See, these were the broad points that could give a way forward. There have been many other, tailor-made approaches that you can think of, that can be policies that can be run in your community, in your district, in your village, wherever you are placed. So if you think that this can be done and this will help generate more employment opportunities which a person sitting in urban area cannot think of, an aspirant sitting in a huge city might not be able to think of, and vice versa. So if you have local solutions, write them in your answer, highlight them, because they will embellish your answer, they will make your answer stand different from what other aspirants are writing. So add your solutions. Whatever these points are there, these are available on the internet. This is something that is available on PIB. Many ministers say this again and again, that this needs to be done. Many critics writing for like popular newspapers of the country address these points. In fact, these points are taken from a very popular editorial of the Hindu. So these points will be there. But what makes your answer different is your own knowledge of life. So add at least one point there in every answer whenever you encounter such a question. So the conclusion is very simple. You can either talk about data again, or we've already given the way forward. The question demanded a way forward for unemployment and things like that. So the conclusion should be a conversation. The conclusion should either sum up what has been happening, or again give a positive outlook to the examiner about your personality. So in the last 2 decades, there has been rapid growth in the GDP, but without simultaneous increase in employment opportunities. This is just a nice paraphrasing for jobless growth. Growth is happening, but joblessness is there. So this trend prevents social mobility and generates chaos in the nation as a whole. Mostly all issues erupt from joblessness and lack of financial resources, with health issues, social issues like communal tensions, child labor, domestic violence, etc. Whenever there is a cash crunch in the economy, or like take the case of a particular house, if enough cash or enough money is not available, what happens? People stay patient till a particular time, but after that the family members start fighting amongst themselves. So if you go back to history, most of the communal riots that happened in the past, they happened whenever there was a decline in the economic growth levels, or when there was a high level of joblessness and unemployment. So that we have to avoid that grim situation, that destructive situation in our country. We cannot survive without good number of and good quality jobs, because these issues, there can be many other issues, mental health, communal rights, child labor, domestic violence, etc. They come out because people do not have resources, people do not have arenas to invest their energy in. There are other reasons also, but this is the prime reason. So it's high time that we understood the realities of the employment state in our economy and work towards generating long-term and secure employment opportunities to harness the full potential of our people or youth, or harness the demographic dividend. This is like the last one here talks about the Sustainable Development Goal 8. Make sure that you learn all the Sustainable Development Goals and use them as way forward or in conclusions in your answers, especially around economy and society. So sustainable development goal 8 is about decent work and economic growth. So you can quote this here anywhere in your answer, either in the intro part or in the conclusion part in your own words. So this was about today. Download the PDF for this presentation from the link in the description below. This entire same PDF is available to you. Send your answers to us in the next 24 hours. As I said, we are moving this initiative to our website very soon. Don't worry about your whatever the fellow aspirants are writing or sending. You'll be able to see that and improve your own skills well in time, and your answers are being evaluated. We are continuously replying to all of you with our feedback. So stay tuned, keep working hard. Prelims is approaching. Whether you are a state civil services aspirant or UPSC aspirant, keep practicing. Answer writing is about practicing. We've seen immense improvement in the quality of answers of people who have been regular with us since day one. Right now also, it's not late. We have around 30 more lectures coming up for this series and beyond that also. So even if you start today, start writing from this answer itself, you'll be able to see a lot of improvement in your answer writing skills and a lot of improvement in your mains marks. So all the best, keep working hard, and see you with another discussion tomorrow.